hard to achieve consensus on a bill that responsibly funds the government into March of next year. It'll go to March 14.
It's a total dumpster fire. I think it's garbage. This is what Washington, D.C. has done. This is why I ran for Congress to try to stop this. And sadly, this is happening again.
Welcome to the House of Representatives.
That was House Speaker Mike Johnson and Republican Congressman Eric Burlison of Missouri yesterday discussing the short-term government funding package. The bill, which congressional leaders released last night, includes over $100 billion of disaster relief funds, funding to rebuild Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge after its March collapse, economic assistance for farmers, and cost of living adjustments, otherwise known as pay raises for lawmakers. The legislation will need to be passed by Friday evening to avoid a government shutdown. Let's bring in House Minority Leader, Democratic Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York. Great to have you on this morning.
Leader Jeffries, thank you so much for being with us. This is, I will say this sounds all too familiar from when I was there. Republicans would get angry when their speaker had to deal with Democrats. But effectively, despite all of the sound and fury, there's going to be a one-vote margin next year. Democrats and Republicans are going to have to work together, or nothing's going to get done, is it?
Good morning, Joe. That's the reality of the situation that the Republicans are going to confront, notwithstanding all of the hype about some massive mandate. The House of Representatives is effectively tied. It's an evenly divided House of Representatives that's going to get even narrower in the next Congress. And so what the American people really want us to do is work together to solve problems for hard-working taxpayers and make their life better, and also be there for them when the federal government has to step in the context of disaster assistance, as an example, and be there for the people of Florida or Georgia or North Carolina who, as a result of the extreme weather events, have had their life upended.
So I'm curious, what are some issues that you see that are possible for Democrats and Republicans to work together on? Do you think you could get a deal, for instance, on immigration?
I think we have a broken immigration system, and we need to try to fix it in a bipartisan and comprehensive manner. And certainly we have to secure the border. There was a bipartisan agreement that was on the table that was a strongly conservative-leaning border security bill as it relates to making sure we address the situation, particularly on the southern border, that Republicans rejected at the direction of Donald Trump. Because at least while Joe Biden has been president, many Republicans don't want to solve the border security challenge. They wanted to weaponize it politically. Hopefully, we can come together and deal with that issue in the next Congress. But the onus will be on the other side of the aisle to act in good faith.
Yeah. What would a deal like that look like? You had Donald Trump talking about possibly a fix for Dreamers when he was interviewed on Meet the Press. Is there a possibility of a really tough border bill that maybe limits the deportations to hardened criminals, but also has a part inside that bill that helps Dreamers get a pathway to citizenship?
I certainly think we have to make sure that there is a robust pathway towards citizenship for Dreamers, people who have been in their country throughout their entire lives, with the exception of perhaps the first few years after birth, and have contributed to communities in so many different ways. And there's bipartisan support for dealing with the Dreamers in a compassionate and sensible, common sense fashion. We also need to make sure that we modernize our immigration system as it relates to farm workers, who are a critical part of the ecosystem in the country, to make sure that we meet the food and nutritional needs of the American people. There's bipartisan support for that. And certainly we have to fix our asylum system, which is broken, and make sure that to the extent that there are going to be deportations, we prioritize violent felons, not breaking up families that include American citizens or legal permanent residents.
Leader Jeffries, good morning. As I know, you're probably hearing from people in your district that Democrats are concerned about what may be coming starting on January 20th under the new Trump administration because Donald Trump has the White House, because Republicans control the House and the Senate. We try to remind people that in the House, it's a one-vote majority right now, that Donald Trump won by 1.5 points, a plurality of the votes. It doesn't mean he's not capable and doesn't have a lot of power to do things that may be offensive to a lot of people. But what are you saying to those voters who are in some ways panicked about what the next 4 or perhaps the next 2 years are like if you're able to take back the House?
Well, as House Democrats, we're going to work hard to make sure that we find bipartisan common ground to get things done for the American people and do that with the incoming administration as best we can, while at the same period of time ensuring that we are protecting the things that matter, protecting Social Security, protecting Medicare, protecting Medicaid, protecting the Affordable Care Act, protecting the progress that we've made in terms of combating the climate crisis. We see a rise of extreme weather events, and certainly protecting a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. And I would remind people that when Donald Trump became president the last time around and took office in January of 2017, his margin in the House of Representatives was 241 Republicans and only 194 Democrats. It's going to be an evenly divided House of Representatives, and will be in a strong position to stop bad things from happening. With those big margins, he still couldn't repeal the Affordable Care Act. Now we find ourselves in a strengthened position in advance of the 2026 midterms.
Well, you mentioned reproductive freedom, and a lot of women are in a very, very difficult position in terms of life-saving abortion health care now. And I'm curious, Leader, if there's any room that you believe there is to work with on this issue. I'm hearing that there might be. It may not be what we want. But what in the next Congress can be done, at least to lift some of these bans and to have a more palatable situation for women who need life-saving abortion health care?
Well, in the most recent National Defense Authorization Act, we were very clear as House Democrats that there should be no partisan right-wing policy changes undermining the ability of military families to secure reproductive health care. We were successful in that regard. In the continuing resolution that's going to be before the Congress this week, we also have ensured that there were no efforts to further erode a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. So we're going to hold the line at the federal level and hold the incoming president to his promise that there will be no national abortion ban.
Leader Jeffries, let me ask you a question. And you and I have known each other a long time. You've been a member of National Action Network. I've known you since you were a lawyer. You have had the ability to try and represent in a passionate way, but also reach out and try to work towards solutions. Isn't the challenge that you have and that Speaker Johnson had to be able to deliver for what your constituents want nationally, but at the same time not let extremists on either side of the aisle sort of dictate the conversation and dictate what's going on in terms of the public debate with a president that plays to the cameras? I mean, how do you and Johnson balance out what you may be able to get through legislatively, but you have Donald Trump who might be up 3 o'clock in the morning torpedoing all that you're trying to achieve?
Well, Rev, good morning. It's great to be with you. I think that the American people want Congress to exercise common sense, to find common ground and deliver for the common good, and just make lives better for hardworking American taxpayers. And if we center our activity with that focus in mind, then we should be able to get things done. And as I said, we're prepared to work with the incoming administration whenever and wherever possible in order to deliver real results.
Okay.
Leader Jeffries, I want to ask you about DOGE, the Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy effort to cut significantly government spending. They've identified $1 trillion, they say. To reach that kind of number, there's some speculation they could target Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. What can you, the Democrats in the minority, though very small minority, try to do to stop them?
Well, under the leadership of former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, when she was leader in the aftermath of the re-election of George W. Bush, Republicans tried to privatize Social Security and sparked an uproar all across the country. And they were in the minority at the time. What's clear is that public sentiment is on the side of making sure that the earned benefit program of Social Security and Medicare, which are not entitlements, they are earned benefits, remain intact so that everyday Americans can retire with the grace and dignity that they deserve. That's a fight we will embrace if the Republicans take it to us. They should not be focused on massive tax cuts for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. We should all be focused on making life better for working-class Americans, and that includes protecting and strengthening Social Security. Under the leadership of John Larson, I'm confident that's something that we can do, of course, partnering with Richie Neal as the lead Democrat on the Ways and Means Committee.
Leader Jeffries, from the tenor and the tone and content of this conversation that we're having with you, and with the Republicans having a one-vote majority, it sounds as if every vote is going to be like a buzzer beater at the end of a basketball game. And we assume, maybe mistakenly, that the Democrats are all aligned under your leadership to vote en masse for whatever you want. But what's the reality on the Democratic side of the aisle? What are your issues that you worry about?
Well, we certainly have a big tent on our side of the aisle, and there may be a variety of different perspectives on any given issue. Our view is that we should always talk it out, have authentic, unfiltered conversations, private conversations being better than those that break into the public domain, have enthusiastic discussions amongst ourselves, but then always find the highest common denominator that we can unify behind in order to make life better for the American people. And that's the way that we've conducted ourselves throughout this Congress. That's the way that we will conduct ourselves in the next Congress.
Also, Leader Jeffries, you have a book out, a new book entitled The ABCs of Democracy. Tell us about it and also how it informs your day-to-day work.
Well, it's an illustrated book for people of all ages that captures what I believe are the American values, the ideals, and the institutions that have made this country the greatest democracy in the history of the world. Yes, it's a turbulent time, but it's important to remember that elections come and elections go, presidents come and presidents go, but at the end of the day, there are a set of values that should guide us in order to continue our country's march toward a more perfect union. That includes always placing working families over the well-connected.
House Minority Leader, Democratic Congressman Hakeem Jeffries of New York, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's always good to see you.